Okay, I want to introduce our demonstrator this morning. He's traveled all the way across Vermont to get here, and he's been turning for 20 years, a member of the Woodchuckers, and has going to turn a German ring, which I had not heard of before. Went to the internet and looked at it and said, "Hey, this is really cool." So Dave's been turning for 20 years, which is about what I've been turning for. I thought I was spinning and turning. I'm spinning in place and turning on the lathe. But anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Dave, he's got his own mic, right?
Yeah. Can you hear me? By the way, I do encourage you to ask questions, but you have to speak loudly for me. I have been turning, as was said, for about 20 years. I do principally bowls, platters, but emphasizing embellishments of different types on them. I do a number of different things like that, principally with local hardware or local woods, maple, beech, ash, oak, things that I can get in my neighbor's forest easily. My background is as a physicist, not a wood turner. I'm not a professional. This is something I'm doing now in my retirement as something to keep me busy. I will demonstrate German ring turning. German ring turning is something that the Germans did starting about 300 years ago in Seefern, Germany, which is near the Czech border. And I will discuss the type of wood they use and the arrangement they use it. But I did find several articles in 2006 in Wood Turning Magazine, which is a British journal. There's an article by Stuart King showing the museum, I'll pass this around, where they do the German ring turning using old equipment. And the German ring turning was something which they used for principally turning small animals, nativity scenes. These were things that were meant to be toys. So you turn them and then you carve them a little bit and paint them. Then there was a subsequent article in the Wood Turning Magazine in 2017 by Richard Finley, who was given a challenge to be able to do that. This is also in the same magazine, but I don't have the physical magazine because since it comes from England, it was difficult to get. Shipping it across the ocean caused a number of problems with the delivery, so I went to an electronic version. So this is just a copy of that one. There is, more recently, a young Australian turner, Simon Begg, who is turning ring turning techniques, but he's not doing it for doing Christmas ornaments. He's an exquisite turner who does very fancy turnings. But when I go through the explanation of the arrangement of the wood, he's using dry wood. I'll be using green wood. His things would not do, it would be hard to do with green wood. So I'll pass these around. Pardon? Oh. Actually, if it's okay, I'm going to take my mask off so I can. So I said I would talk a little bit about the arrangement of the wood. If you're making small animals, so in this case, I have the outline of a horse. This was just a branch of beech, which I cut a little more than a 1/4 inch thick, and showed the two orientations that you could have for making an animal. So if you're doing the German ring turning, what you want to do, and you want to do animals, you could either do it this way, the grain is running up here, so that their legs are in the direction of the grain, or you could do it in this direction, against the grain. And the challenge there is that if you do it against the grain, so I had a thin piece of cherry, and in this case what I did is I cut a thin strip where the grain runs this way. And if you try and snap it, it's fairly strong. On the other hand, if you have cut the cherry so that the grain runs this way, and I try and snap it, there's no problem at all. So if you want to turn something with skinny legs like this, you want to make sure that you turn it so the legs follow the direction of the grain. And then the question is, how can you do that? If you want to mass produce the animals, and the way the Germans came up with it is by doing what they call this ring turning. So you take a piece of green wood, and you're going to turn essentially a torus, a donut. And then when you're all done, you're going to make slices out of it. And each one of those slices becomes the animal that you're doing. So you're going to make a profile on this. So this is a cross-section of a profile that I just did on Thursday in practice for doing this. Pardon? Okay, so this is the profile that I want to turn. I turned it on Thursday, and as you'll be able to see, it's already beginning to crack. So if you do this, you want to cut these into your wedges. So in this case, you cut them into a wedge, and you end up with something like this. So it's thicker at the bottom, thinner at the top. So let me pass some of these things around. Sorry, the question was if I turn on the
If you slice them into thin pieces,
yes.
Right after you turn the torus, is there less chance of the little pieces cracking?
In general, they won't crack because they're thin enough, and they'll dry in 1 to 2 days. So those, I said I turned on Thursday, and on Friday they had dried enough so I could put them on a sander and do a quick sanding of them. But if I had left it as a complete ring, then I'd be in trouble because it would already start to crack by today. And if anyone wants to practice with little pieces of wood and see whether you can crack them or not, feel free. Okay, are there any questions about the process? So let me tell you what, I mentioned Simon Begg, and he does these very complicated designs. What I want to do is turn something that's just going to be a Christmas ornament. And so I want I want simple designs without too much detail. And what's good design? Well, you know, gingerbread men, gingerbread ladies, a star or a Christmas tree, a bell, soldier. There's a number of simple designs that you can do that you can end up with a profile that's appropriate. Probably the easiest one to turn is a Christmas tree, because a Christmas tree does not have to be symmetric on both sides. So if one side's a little bit different from the other, it doesn't matter. And when you're doing the ring turning, you only see one side at a time. And then you have to turn it around and do the other side. The way that I think the Germans actually did it was they would actually work on both sides without turning it around. It's just more difficult to get in from the headstock side and get the tail. So what I do is I just turn it around and make it easier. But that means that now you're sort of working blind. You've got to rely upon continually making measurements. So I'll be stopping and starting frequently to be able to take measurements as I go. So you come up with a design. I just went on the computer, looked for clip art. This one? Look for yeah. For different designs on clip art, I then use the printer to scale them. So what I'm looking for, I want to make an ornament that's about 3 inches tall. And if I then scale these, I'm going to use a design that's about 2 1/4 inches wide. Now, this is a piece of beech. A lot of the beech in the area where I am is dying because of a disease, and it gets all these cankers on it, and the thing slowly dies. This came from a tree. So this is about a 9-inch tree that the top third of it fell down, tickled the power lines, and turned all my neighbors' power off. So I took the rest of it down, and this happened about a month ago, and this is what I ended up with. So all I've done so far is just cut about an 8.5-inch circle to get rid of the bark, make it closer to being a circle. And then the question is, okay, how do I want to mount this? Well, one of the easiest way is just to use a screw chuck. So all I've done is put the one-way screw here in the chuck, and I'm going to then screw this on here and then turn it that way. As I said, I'm going to want to turn this around from one side to the other. So how do you do that? Well, one way to do it is just drill a hole all the way through. So I can reverse it and do the other side. Now, the other thing that makes it easier is I have drilled a 1/4-inch hole about an 1.5 inches from the center. And that is going to be the peak. In this case, I'm going to do a gingerbread lady. So that's going to be the peak of the head. So when I'm turning on this side, I know when I've gotten to the top of the head, because it's here. When I turn it around the other way, and I'm going to be turning the same profile over here, there's someone who wants to get in the door. I have a way to know where the head is on the other side. So it's just, it makes it easier when you do it without having to stop and make exact measurements. And these are not going to be exact measurements either. Okay, so. And when this thing goes on, it looks like it's wobbling from side to side. Okay. Okay, I'm going to, because this is green wood, um, the grain, by the way, of course, is going this way. It's going to come off in mostly small pieces, particularly because when I'm working over here, it's going to be end grain. And by the way, when you do end grain, if you're doing that, what you're normally taught is you, contrary to when you're doing side grain, you turn from the inside out. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do whatever I can to get the wood out. There's not enough room for me to be able to turn that, and I have to go in. So bear with me on that. What I find is convenient is to use an old lab coat. Because it's long sleeve. It has the problem that it does not get to your neck. So in this case, my wife put a Velcro strap on here. And the other thing is you don't want to have your cuffs flopping around. So she put Velcro straps on those too. Okay. And also make sure you bring up your tailstock, particularly if you're doing a demonstration. You don't want it flying loose. Let's see, right down here. Okay, so I'm going to use a spindle roughing gouge. I just want to get this thing into a circle. The other thing that I usually use when I turn is a bicyclist glove. I find that when you get close to the piece of the wood, having it hit this rather than your skin makes it a little bit easier to deal with. Okay, this feels like it's round. I said that we want something that's 3 inches tall and 2¼ inches wide. So this is the form that I'm going to try and turn. This is certainly wider than my 2½ inches. So the first thing I want to do is flatten this side so that I can make my measurements here and in the outer diameter. And then when I get into the other side, I'll take care of that. So okay, I'm going to have to back this off a little so that I can get the tool rest in there. Okay, so for doing this, I'm going to use a bowl gouge. I just want this to be flat. Turn the speed up a little. If using a screw chuck doesn't work, or if you don't have a screw chuck, what you can do is just turn a tenon. So right now, I could turn a tenon on this side, so when I turn it around, I can hold it that way too. I don't need it. It's just that the nice thing about the screw chuck is that it uses less space. It allows me to maneuver around better. Now here's the 1/4-inch hole that I'm using to locate the head. Now I want to come back and work on the outer rim. And this is where I want the 2 1/4 inches wide. So two and a quarter is about here. So you can see I've got about 1 inch of wood to waste. So, you could cut this on the bandsaw, but I will just use you have to be careful cutting something like this on the bandsaw. So I'll just, when I turn it around, I'll put it on the floor. Sometimes when you're dealing with wet wood, a pencil doesn't work very well. And the other thing I found frequently that for marking things up is this is just a red crayon. It works very well for marking things. Makes it easier to see. So what I'm going to do is just use a parting tool. I'm going to go in, I don't know, 1/2 inch or so I know where the other side of the piece is. And you can see that I'm hoping the threads are not working very well. I'm hoping it's going to hold, because if it doesn't, what I'm going to have to do is either use the other piece of wood that I brought, or actually turn a tenon and hang on to it that way. So let's see if this works. Now what I want to do is get my measurements for where, okay, so this is what I'm trying to make. So right now what I'm going to do is mark where the bottom of the dress is, where the bottom of the feet are, so the lowest point and the highest point is viewed from the outside edge. So an easy way to do that is this depth gauge, which I got from Harbor Freight for a minimal amount of money. It's a high quality tool. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my measurements from the edge, because that's the easiest thing I can measure to. I've got an edge right here. I will take the measurements to the lowest point, to the other side, to the other lowest point, the other foot. And then to the middle. So now, now what we're going to do is start shaping. This is going to be the high point as far as the feet are concerned. This is going to be the low point. So I'm going to start from one side, go down, the other side go down, and try and get this V shape, or actually a U shape, for the bottom of the feet. For that, I have a spindle gouge, which I think is probably 3/8 of an inch. And then I want to turn the ends of the feet as I said, there's a lot of stopping and starting. And I made a template out of just thin cardboard, and which is going to be a negative template. So I can put it up against the wood and see how well I'm doing. And it's not great, but as I said, I'm not like Simon Began. I don't need precision work here. I've got to get rid of a little bit more of this wood over here because I'm running into it. I'm just trying to clean up the shape a little bit by doing shear scraping. And let me check. I still need to get rid of a little more to the side. And I need the area between the feet to be a little bit deeper. Okay, so I'm hoping that that's it for the bottom. as far as shaping the bottom of the feet. If you're worried about the finish, I wouldn't worry about it yet, because this is very wet wood. If you wanted to sand it, you could sand it with Abranet, which is this mesh sandpaper. It will work on wet wood, but the easiest thing to do is just wait a day after you cut them and sand it then. And most of what the sanding that you're going to be doing is on the sides, not on the end, not on the sides of the piece. So now I'm going to go to the side. And I'm worried that because this screw chuck is not holding very well, and when I get to turning it around, I'm going to have a problem with this thing slipping, because I got to get rid of an inch of wood over here. So I'm going to turn a tenon over here to match this chuck. So I assume that's about 2 inches that I need. So that I'm hoping that it's going to hold well enough so I can do the shaping here, and with a tenon, when I turn it around, I'll be able to work over there. So now I have to do the same thing that I did before for the end, but now what I have to do is mark the points on the side. So the first thing I want is to mark from the bottom of the foot to this point where the skirt comes out. So that's right here. And then I want to mark from the bottom of the foot to the armpit. And although you may not be able to see, it is very difficult to see with this pencil on the end grain. So I'm going to go to my red crayon. And then I'm going to mark from the bottom of the foot to the top of the arm. And then the bottom of the foot to the top of the head. Okay, I don't know if you can see on here. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, first thing is I'm going to shape the toe on this side, go in a little ways, and then come out where the end of the skirt comes out. And I'm going to be using the spindle gouge. Now I'm going to go in with spindle gouge, go in where the armpit is, because that's the armpit is going to be the deepest cut I'm making in from the side. So I've established this point down here. I want to establish this point here, and then I want nearly a straight line between them. I'm going to have to go slower than I normally would because This is slipping. I'm afraid I'm just going to have to deal with that. Okay. What I'm going to have to do is make a tenon here, turn it around the other way, do the other side first, and then come back to this. Okay, I want to fix up the edge of this enough so I have a nice clean edge to the tenon. And I want a flat shoulder. Okay. This area that I just made the tenon actually is going to become part of the head, but I'm not worried about that because the head is recessed further in. So I think I can deal with that. Sure. Yeah. With the wet wood, and I've had that problem before, so I have my dental picks here. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that sounds better. And you can see it's going on wobbling, and the thing that ends up making it flatter is when it hits the jaws of the chuck. This feels better. I'm hoping that'll last. Again, I want to bring up the tailstock as long as I can. When I get to dealing with the head, I'm going to move the tailstock out of the way as long as this screw chuck continues to hold. And you can see it's not the same concentric. Oh, that's much better. Okay, so now what I want to do is find out how deep to make the armpit. So I want to measure in from the side. I've got about 1/8 of an inch yet to go. I'm almost there. When you're turning like this, going down into an indentation, the one thing you want to try to avoid is actually making a cut on both sides of your gouge at the same time. It's likely to create a catch if you do it. You want to, when you do it, you want to come in on one side first and then clean up on the other. So I go in, I'm now working on the left side, then I clean up on the right side. And the problem is, what do you do at the very end? Well, be careful. Okay, so now the next thing I want to start working on, so I've now worked on this profile over here. I'm up to the armpit. I want to, the top of the arm is almost level or almost straight across. So I want to go in on the other side of that enough so that I can curve over the hand. Now, since this is no longer circular, it's wobbling, my mark from before, there, that shows what I'm going to be working for. If I were to get rid of the tailstock at this point, move it back, I can access this more easily. Since I'm doing a demonstration, I'm going to leave it on for now and deal with it. Okay, so now what I want to do is round this off some for the hand. Since the arm is not straight out like this, it's actually slightly angled. I want to put an incline to the arm on the underside. Now I want to see if I am close to where I want. So again, I have a template that I made to fit the side. Okay, so yeah, I need to get rid of some of this wood right here, otherwise the skirt sticks out too much. And I want to emphasize the edge of the skirt above the shoe. And I'm going to do that just by using a skew as a scraper. Normally you worry about the the finish you would get with a skewer scraper. With green wood, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to get a great surface whether you use a gouge or a scraper. You'll get a better surface with a gouge, but the scraper's okay. When you're dealing with these ornaments at the end, the thin part on the side is not much of a problem. I mean, even as long as it's a reasonable finish, it's the front and the back, which you can use a belt sander on. Okay, so now I have to work on the head. And what I want to do is, again, this time I want to measure how deep till I hit the end of the head. Now I know I know where the top of the head was supposed to be because I had marked it out before. I have now turned it away because I was going to make a tenon. I'm making a tenon, so I have to establish where the top of the head is going to be again, and it's where I drilled that 1/4-inch hole, so I know where to find it. Now what I want to do is I want to make this section here where the head is going to be curved like this. At the moment, all I'm going to do is come in and I'll make a flat wall here at the edge of the head, and then I'll have to shape the head. The reason for doing it that way is I want to get this tailstock out of the way. I want to leave it in as long as I can, so I'll do the part of just making this flat up against the side of the head. Now I have to keep stopping to check my depth. I've got about 1/8 of an inch more to go before I get to the edge of the head. If I'm going to use a tenon, if I have to use a tenon on this side, I want to leave enough room here for the tenon and to have a shoulder so that the chuck will solidly hit the edge of the collar of the tenon so I can work against. So I think my tenon is okay. I'm going to back off the tailstock so that I can get in there and shape the head. The other thing I find helpful when I'm trying to do that is I have a 1/4-inch spindle gouge. You have to be careful because this is not very strong. So you don't put it over the long ways off the end of the tool rest. You might bend it. I have a small skew, and I have, in this case, this is just a scraper. All it is a 1/4-inch by 1/4-inch piece of high-speed steel. I just ground the end, and it acts as a scraper. Sometimes it's helpful, but this is something you can make easily. Okay, so I think I have the measurements I need now because I'm at the edge of the head. I now have to get into the top of the head and into the neck. Is this going to interfere with the TV? Okay. It makes it easier for me when working on this to be able to see where I'm trying to go. A big pardon? I think it's okay. I don't know if you know what Turner's elbow is? Womp. I took a class, turning class with a orthopedic surgeon, and jokingly I asked him if he had ever run into Turner's elbow. He actually took me seriously. So this is the area where you better be careful, because I'm turning and I'm trying to switch from the left side to the right side of the front of the thing. So I come in, I'm dealing first against here and then against here. I don't want to just jam it in, because I'm going to get a catch. Now I have to find out the depth to the neck. So I want to go from the outside edge to here. Oh, I have to be careful where I'm measuring from. So I want to measure from the tip of the mitten, and I think I'm deep enough right now. The harder one to get is the one at the top of the head, because I want this point to be just beyond the midpoint of the turning. So I've got an extra 1 inch of wood here, but I've got to go in. This was 2 1/4 inches. That means I've got to go in at least 1 1/8. In fact, you really want to go in a little bit farther. So this, I'm going to have to turn my way in there. The other thing I'm dealing with is I've got to leave this here in case I need a tenon. So I'm actually going to undercut the tenon. So this is going to be more like a tapered plug. But as long as this is still solid, I think I'll be okay. So I wouldn't worry out there. And if you saw what I just did there, I ended up scraping coming back, so my surface isn't so great. I have to fix that up. This is where this 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch scraper can come in handy, because I just want to clean some wood out of here so I have some place to work. Let's see how deep I've gotten. So I want from the tip of the mitten to the middle of the head. So it's just over 1 inch. And the problem is I've got another 1/4 inch I've got to clean out from there. So I'm going to have to work my way taper this way. It's getting close. The problem with, if you don't get this at least halfway, what you end up when you're done is you end up essentially with somebody whose hair is flopped one way or the other. And that's going to be normal. It is hard to get these things exactly lined up, particularly if you see this thing wobbling, and you've got to rely upon having a sander when you're all done. Okay, I'm going to call that quits as far as the depth. Now I'm going to see if I can fix up some of the shape of the side of the head. Okay, hopefully sandpaper will take care of imperfections. I'm sorry, what was that? Well, you know, you can take a piece of paper and some glue and 2 pebbles and you have 2 grit. Okay, now one thing I can check is where's the top of the head, and I have my reference point, which is that 1/4-inch hole which I drilled down here. So that goes all the way through. Yeah, we can get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm going to reverse this. Okay, when I made the tenon, I turned the radius down, so I think I'm just actually I'm close to touching the tenon with the shoulder of the chuck. If I had made it too small, then I wouldn't have a nice shoulder for the chuck draws to straighten this out. Okay, now what I got to do is get rid of 1 inch of wood. And for this, I want to bring that tailstock up again. And I want to just waste away a whole bunch of wood. I can tell it's not going to be circular. So I'm going to use my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. I guess it would help if I tighten down the tool rest. I move the, is the focus still okay on this? And before I go too far, I want to check and make sure that I don't go beyond the 2¼ inches that I want. Now it's about halfway there. Okay. Okay, now I have to mark up this edge for the bottom of the where the toe is, where the skirt comes out, where the armpit is. So I need my figure again. So now what I want to do is, how far up do I have to go to get the edge of the skirt? Nice thing about turning this green wood is that it's soft. So that was the edge of the skirt. Now I want the armpit. And then to the neck. And then to the top of the head. Okay, now I repeat the process that I did on the other side. So the first thing I'm going to do is shape the, go into the bottom of the armpit. Turning end grain, I don't know if you can notice, but there's a lot of this little dust, and a lot of it comes right up here. now I need to know if I've gone in far enough for the armpit. So I'm measuring the depth, the end of the mitten to the armpit. And I've got to go a good 1/8 of an inch. I think I moved this as I jammed it in because I didn't screw it tight. So let me set my depth gauge again. Yeah, I got a little more than 1/8 of an inch I have to go in yet. And I'm going to shape from the toe to the edge of the skirt. Sometimes having a broader skew allows me to do a little bit of this shaping more easily. What I want is for both of these to be symmetric, one side to the other, so I'm just checking, as far as I can tell, is reasonable. Now I'm going to work on the top of the arm and the head. And I want to get the depth that I need to the side of the head. So I'm going to I've got about go another 1/4 of an inch before I get to start shaping the head. I need a little bit more. Okay, at this point, I have to start working on the head. This thing is in the way, so I'm going to get rid of it. But before I do, I'm going to clean up a little bit of this so I have more room to work. Okay, let's get this thing out of the way. Now, hopefully I have all the measurements that I need. I'm at the side of the side of the head, so I need to just flatten that out a bit, and then I'll start worrying about shaping things in here. Okay, now I'm going to work on the mitten. I want to round it off. And I'm just going to shape the end of the mitten with a skew. There's a scraper. Okay, now I have to start working on the head. The one thing I have to get now is the depth to the neck. So according to this, I need almost a quarter of an inch more. So I'm going to go to the 1/4 inch gouge, spindle gouge. Just caught that one. There's a knot in here which I'm catching. I need a little bit more yet. Okay, now I think I'm hopefully, yeah, I think I'm good. I've got to start shaping the head. This time, I'm not worried about saving any wood here in the middle, so it doesn't matter if I just get rid of more of it to give me more room to shape the head to work my way in. Because the hardest thing at this point is going all the way in and meeting the top of the head and from the other side. So you do whatever it makes it easy to get in there. But before I go all the way, I want to make sure I know where the top of the head is supposed to be, and also to do a little bit of shaping of the side of the head. So the head, my hole is right here, so I can tell where I'm supposed to be for the top. And I want to do a little bit of the, as I said, the shaping of the head. Okay, this is where the fun part comes. I've got to go in far enough so I meet the other side of the head and worry about this thing, what's going to happen to this torus when I part it off. Okay, I'm almost there. Okay, now I can tell by looking at this that the top of the head, I have the cowlick on the top of the head. They don't match up exactly, but here is the 1/4-inch hole that I drilled. And you can see I've used that to line up to the top of the head. Now the question is, how much does this thing look like a gingerbread lady? So the next test is I go to the bandsaw and I take a slice out of this. The one thing, this is about, it's a little more than 8 inches in diameter. I have a 3-inch tall ornament, 3 inches on this side. That's 6 inches. That means the inside is 2 inches. So the question is, how much do I want my wedge to be? So if this is 8 inches diameter, that means it's about 24 inches in circumference. If I say I want a 1/4 inch thickness here, that would be almost 100 slices. But the more important thing is, what about on the inside diameter, where this is 2 inches in diameter, and that'll get you 6 inches. So 6 inches divided by 100 is not very thick. So what I will do is I will take a slice, probably 3/8 of an inch thick here, and a little less than a 1/4 inch here in the center. And what you'll see is that as I go along, the first ones will be fine, but eventually I'll be cutting more like in an angle like this. And so I have to keep making corrections and throw out a piece of wood that maybe is an inch thick here and 0 inches thick in the middle to keep correcting. So I'm not going to get 100 pieces of wood out of here. I'm going to get far less. If you're concerned about that and you want something that's is thicker in the middle, use a bigger piece of wood. You know, if you had something which is 12 inches in diameter, and you take 3 inches, 3 inches, that would be 6 inches. You'd have 6 inches in the center. When you cut your wedges, you have a much thicker piece. I'm doing a demo, and I wanted to get it done within a finite amount of time. I chose to use this, and it also happened to be the tree that fell in our backyard. So let me cut this out. Okay, so this was the ring after cutting it in half. And then these were cross sections, and you can see that the base is thicker than the head, and I've had to make some correction as we go through. This, if you wait a day, you can sand this on a belt sander, but you have to be careful on a belt sander that you're not removing your fingernails. Or so the way I've done it on a belt sander, if the belt sander is moving in the direction that the tool rest is, I put half of the figure on the sander, belt sander, and hold this down. We're on top of the sandpaper with 2 fingers here. Flip it over, do the same thing. Flip it over, do the head and the other side. The sandpaper is running in the direction of the grain. Now to get rid of the cowlick at the top and make it a little symmetric, I just run it on the top of the belt sander. And you can do this, you can clean up a whole bunch of these fast on a belt sander. You're not looking for precision. But let me mention another way you can do this, and that okay. Here's a star, which I did with a ring turning a few years ago. You can do any figure that you want. So if for example, I was doing gingerbread ladies, I could cut out on a bandsaw with a thin blade or a coping saw the figure you want, then color the edge. So in this case, I colored it red. You want something that you can easily see, black, red, something of that sort. And then when you have your piece of wood, you have your solid piece of wood, if I were to make a radial cut and another one, so if this was uniform and 1/4 inch, if I were to make a slice 1/4 inch to whatever depth I needed, and then I would just glue this in place. Now when you turn it, you know how far to go, because as soon as you start seeing red, you know you're close to what it is. It's easier to get, without having to stop and keep making measurements, it's easier to get a reproducible template. You just have to figure out how are you going to make your original positive template, how are you going to glue it into place, and then you can proceed. But it's a technique I have seen, but I have never used. Pardon? Simon did that? Yeah. If you're doing something that's an elaborate design, that's probably the way to go. Otherwise, if I've never watched his demo, but he presumably would have to stop and start very frequently if he was relying just on measurements, as I was doing in here. Okay, now the next question is, what can you do after you've waited a day and they've dried? How can you decorate this? And I'm looking, there was an original gingerbread lady that was dry that I did on Thursday. Yeah, these. Okay, so the question is, what can I do to decorate them? Well, one obvious thing you can do is just use a magic marker and put eyes, buttons, and some frills. Or another thing which you can do is if you go to the hobby store and buy puff paint, or what they call 3D fabric paint. So in this case, these are called scribbles. This is shiny Christmas red, and this is shiny hunter green, but whatever colors you want. And I'm going to paint on your lathe, but hopefully I won't get it all over. You're not supposed to do that in front of the shop teacher. Yeah. I've heard of red eye, but I think I'm going to make green eye instead. And the nice thing about this is that you don't have to worry about a paintbrush. You don't have to worry about cleaning it up. This is, it's called 3D paint. It's a fabric paint designed for a fabric. If you go to a hobby store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, I know Michael's has it. I would assume Hobby Lobby has it also, but it's quick and easy. I have used this puff paint or 3D paint to make snowmen with a carrot for a nose. And so you make the nose out of orange, and you can make it 1/4 inch long. So I'll pass this around. If you want red fingerprints, poke at it. If you don't, let it dry for at least an hour. Okay, I think that's it. Question, yeah. Did I finish the top? No, I haven't. I mean, you can. There's no reason why you can't. After sanding it, you could put whatever your desired finish is. What I have done with these is just drill a small hole near the top of the head and put a tiny ribbon through it. Then you can hang it on a Christmas tree as a decoration. Or if you want, you could have a row of these, somehow figure out how you want them hang hands together like that and make a row of, I suppose you could put a ribbon, glue a ribbon behind several of these and have them as a string.
You know, the nice.
Going to come to what I want.
Yeah, I know, that's cool.
That's
Probably-
a surprise.
Probably having it like that star template would have been a better thing to do for a demo than but this is the way the Germans did it originally. They didn't use a template. They just made measurements and go at it. When they cut their pieces, though, they're cutting them thicker. So if this was a horse, the feet of the horse would go down this way. And so you cut out a piece that's maybe a half-inch thick or so, and then you can use a knife and split up between the legs, shape the sides a little bit so it's a little bit more rounded. But it's a way to mass produce lots of these figures with one turning.
Cool.
And
Mike has got Simon Bay.